not that good anymore. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you here in this great number. Hello to our panelists. Welcome. My name is Fleischer. I'm the director of the Heinrich Böll Foundation office here in Beirut. Thank you for coming. Thank you for exploring our space as well. We have been here for a little over a year, and the Heinrich Böll Foundation has been in the country for almost 20 years. So I just want to give you a little bit of background of who we are before I hand over to the Nature Conservation Center, our cooperation partner for this event. The Heinrich Böll Foundation is the German Green Political Foundation. We are part of the Green Movement in Europe and Germany. The Green Movement in Germany particularly came as an anti-war movement and an anti-nuclear power movement in the 70s. And the party that was formed as a result of this movement was the German Green Party, who we are close to but not part of. We are close to their values, which stand for environmental justice, gender justice, and human rights. So if you have any questions about us after the event, please approach me or my colleague Christophe, who will be moderating today's event. I'm really happy to welcome you here also on World Environment Day. I think Lebanon is in dire need of a discussion of environmental issues. I think we're all literally feeling the heat of the changes that are occurring in the climate and in the context in the country. So I'm also looking forward to hearing from you, hearing your questions, and having a lively discussion after our interventions from the panel. I want to thank NCC, the Nature Conservation Center, for this collaboration. And I will hand over to Antoine Kallab, the Associate Director of NCC, for a few welcoming words. So once again, thank you and welcome in our office.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, camera. Thank you, Anna, for the introductions. On behalf of the AUB Nature Conservation Center, I would like to welcome you all and thank HBS and the panelists for their support in organizing today's event. So this discussion is the third installment of our 2023 series, Navigating Climate Change and Environmental Threats in the MENA region, Challenges and Opportunities. So the series is organized by AUB-NCC with the Issam Faris Institute, the Heinrich Boll, I'm not going to know how to pronounce it, Foundation, the Asfari Institute at AUB, and Arab Reform Initiative. Through this series, we are looking to promote the importance of multilateral action in the face of climate and environmental threats. We are convinced that global challenges require global efforts at a local scale, and AUB-NCC will remain a platform that can channel these efforts through partnership, scientific evidence, and community engagement. For our panel with HBS, we cannot think of a more fitting theme than grassroots environmental activism. Similarly to today's speakers, HBS is known for its alternative stances that question status quos and refuse to dissociate climate action from democracy, human rights, and social justice. Their upcoming summer school is one of the many examples that reflect the philosophy of participation, empowerment, and co-design, rather than traditional top-down approach to international development. To moderate this panel, we're lucky to have Christophe Maroun, the HBS Program Manager for Environmental Justice. Christophe is a specialist in environmental justice, political ecology, cities, and sustainability, as well as a very close friend. So once again, welcome everyone, and Christophe, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you everyone for showing up in such big numbers. So as has been said already, I'm going to be the moderator of today's panel. I'm just going to start with a small, maybe not that small, but small introduction on the topic. Just a reminder before we start that there is a live interpretation for those who need it from English to Arabic and Arabic to English, both online and in person. So if you need like headphones, they're in the back. So yeah, I guess we can start. So good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to this panel discussion organized jointly by AUB-NCC and the Heinrich Böll Foundation. We gather here today on World Environment Day to shed the light on the engaging and ever-evolving topic of grassroots environmental activism in Lebanon. So instead of diving straight into a historical review of the global and local environmental justice movement and going on an overly academic rant, let's take a more personal approach that resonates, I think, with all of us. So allow me to transport you back to October 13, 2019, time when wildfires ravaged various regions of the country. These devastating fires, fueled by very high temperatures and high winds, exposed the authorities' lack of preparedness. I remember sitting in a friend's living room back then, and the mood was really somber as we watched the distressing scenes unfold on TV. And the smoke-filled air and smell of ashes didn't make things any easier with the helplessness and despair that we felt. And back then, it had been around 4 years since the You Stink movement, I think, that had brought some sort of hope also with it, but didn't lead to anything in the end, like anything concrete or substantial. This is something we might debate today. But then a few days after the fires, on October 17, Lebanon experienced its largest uprising to date, often described as a revolution. So fueled by collective anger on the forest fire fiasco, which symbolized years of government corruption, and triggered by the introduction of regressive taxes to address looming financial crisis, thousands of citizens flooded the streets, demanding the resignation of the government. So the weeks and months that followed were marked by sustained protests, providing reasons for optimism. And coincidentally, around the same time, a popular movement had gained momentum in the fight to save the Bisri Valley from a World Bank-funded dam project. So these things happened around the same time. At first glance, these two seemingly unconnected movements, the uprising against the government and the popular movement against the dam, found a connection through the activists of Save Bisri themselves. So what initially appeared as a localized environmental struggle gradually transformed into a broader conversation about public spaces and environmental policies in the nation. So I take you back to this moment not to dwell on what might have been, but to emphasize the significance of this moment as a turning point in Lebanon's environmental activism. So these events perfectly encapsulate the questions we aim to explore today. What factors contribute to successful activism campaigns? How can grassroots mobilizations be harnessed to promote sustainable environmental policies? Do we observe interconnectedness among local and regional struggles? And what role do environmental movements play in driving systemic and political change? To shed light on these questions, we are privileged to host esteemed panelists who will share their stories and experiences, providing invaluable insights into environmental mobilization and its potential for transformation. We will delve into their strategies, learn from their best practices, and examine the challenges they have faced along the way. So our panelists hail from diverse backgrounds, representing civil society organizations, environmental campaigns, and media outlets. And without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. I'll start with Suzanne Baaklini, currently head of the non-political features in the Lebanese news department in L'Orient-Le Jour. She has been a journalist specializing in environmental reporting since 1997. She has written about the main environmental issues in Lebanon for years and covered most of the climate summits since 2009. Unsi Daif, a former academic who became an environmental civil society actor. He's the founder of Idama, an environmental social enterprise based in Masdar City, UAE, that focuses on sustainable development, education, and training. And in 2017, he co-founded the Lebanese Association for Environmental and Social Justice, JIBAL, to which HBS is a partner. Samir al-Khouri, at the end of the line, an environmental activist who has participated in several campaigns, most notably the Save Bisri campaign. He has also started several initiatives related to solid waste management and sustainable food systems. And last but not least, Julien Jeraisati, program director of Greenpeace Middle East. He has organized and led several local and regional environmental climate campaigns, which we are happy to share with you. So on behalf of AUB-NCC and the Heinrich Boll Foundation, I want to thank the panelists first for taking the time to come and join us on this important discussion. And I also extend my appreciation to the audience, both that's here and online. And yeah, we can start, I think, discussing what we came to discuss. So yeah, I think it was a bit, it made sense for us to start the conversation going from the sort of the micro level, speaking about one particular campaign, and zooming out a bit to see more how things are happening, like locally at the level of the country, and then maybe going to a more regional approach. So to do so, we will start with Samer, who's gonna, I think, tell us a bit about the Save Bisri campaign, his role in it, and tell us a bit what happened back then, what led you to mobilize, and what was the context that led you to do so.
Hello. All right. So hi, my name is Samer. Thank you for the introduction and for having us here. So basically just going to give a small description or an introduction about Bisri. Maybe most of you are familiar of this valley or meadow, as we call it in Arabic, Marsh Bisri. It's an area located in the Shuf, 30 minutes away from the city of Saida. It's an area that has been inhabited by several civilizations, and it's rich in culture, even history. It has more than 50 archaeological sites. It has a monastery, a church, of course, agricultural lands because the soil there is quite fertile, more than millions of trees. And with that, you all know it comes like natural habitats, river, and its own ecosystem or biosphere. So in 2014, actually, the CDR, which is the Center of Development and Research, Majlis al-Inma' wal-A'mar, that is mostly handled by most corrupt people in Lebanon, whether they're related to politicians or just crony capitalists, building our roads, our infrastructure, and you can all see how it's going. So in 2014, I'm going to be politically correct and not name people. So in 2014, the CDR initiated this project to the World Bank, asking for a fund of $800 million to build a 60 meters concrete wall that would have destroyed almost 6 million square meters of land. And with that will come displacement of local people and the whole chain that comes after destroying nature. So as well as this specific area has like important tectonic plates, or as they call them, fault lines, 2 fault lines. And in 1959 happened a major earthquake there that resulted in probably 200 or 300 deaths, and more than 30,000 people were displaced. So the dam were to be built on these tectonic plates. And I believe if this dam was completed, the earthquake in Turkey would have demolished the region of Lebanon and mostly Shuf and Jizin. As you mentioned, with the so the fight against this dam started in 2014, but it was only through local communities or people that live in these areas. I personally didn't know about this area until 2019, until the Lebanese uprising. So on November 9, 2019, I remember I joined this bus and we went from Beirut up to Bisri. And it was the first time where we could destroy the gates and just enter the square and started camp there. I personally camped there for almost a year until the Beirut blast happened. And throughout this year of camping and activation, we conducted several protests on the World Bank offices, and simultaneous protest between Lebanon and major cities where we have a lot of diaspora, like Paris, New York, Montreal, and I think London and Sydney as well. So it was impressive how we were able to gather this much people, and social helped a lot. We created Slack channels, WhatsApp groups, and this is how we could mobilize. Not only we were against this dam, but we also provided solutions and alternatives that wouldn't cost more than $50 million to be able to bring or have clean water to the area of Greater Beirut, the Shuf, and Jazin. The numbers they had and the reasons they used to build this dam were quite tricky, like they always do, based on false numbers, false studies. They just come with oppression, and mostly to indigenous people or mostly to local people, asking them they need to clear out their lands because there's a project that's signed from the government. They used to buy their lands with dirt money. They even made some farmers sell their cattle, sell their herds just to kick them out of these areas. And a lot of people are farmers there, so their income is mostly from agricultural aspects, as well as this project would have killed not only ecological things, but many touristic attraction could have been done there and can still be done there since we managed to stop the project. So this area, as I said, is quite rich, not only agriculturally and not only because we love trees that we wanted to stop this, but these project or business people came in. They even stole the soil from there. It's red soil. The red soil is known for construction. It's very beneficial. They just stole the soil. They didn't chop off trees. They removed them from the roots. And when we entered this, we were quite surprised and shocked how they dealt with everything. They stole stones from these archaeological sites. There's a Roman temple and a lot of things. I could go on for hours. This topic holds at my heart, although I'm not even from that area. I don't know if I have, if you want to ask something.
Actually, thank you for describing all this. I think one interesting question would be, so there is obviously the Lebanese government has a plan to build several dams along the whole length of the country. Many of these dams that are being constructed or have been constructed have been met with some kind of protests have been met with resistance, basically, from sometimes local communities and sometimes a bit more national, like Bisri. What I want to ask is that obviously the Bisri campaign was more successful than the others, and what is specifically led to that? Is it just because of the context and the circumstances back then, or were you able to do something differently that led to that?
All right. So throughout the years, these environmental movements have been growing, and we can see it clearly. More and more people are joining, but out of the 15 dams they constructed, only one is half functional. That is the Shabrouh Dam, and now it requires a lot of maintenance, and I'm not sure if there's money for it. So, what helped more people join this fight, and me as well, is the Lebanese revolution that happened in 2019. But the way this fight was conducted, we had several specialists joining on the fight, giving us alternatives, solutions, and not only, yes, we're against this because it's for a specific political party, but also we had alternatives that wouldn't cost $600 or $700 million, rather like $50 million. We created these talks We had videos, we had campaigns, we had at some point had people invited over to the Bisri meadow where like some specialists came and spoke about the importance of preserving this land, especially that in the area of Bisri, it's rich in soil. As I said, the soil is quite fertile. In 1950, we used to export strawberries and avocados from Bisri to Egypt and other countries, and now it has completely stopped because at some point, political parties, when they knew that more people are joining and they were against this project, one specific political party threw industrial waste in the river of Bisri, Al-Awali River it's called, and mostly people used this water to grow their food. And so they started using oppression in ways. They also, like while we were camping there, they used to send like political party followers to create fights or infiltrate camps, asking for like drugs, alcohol, just to have something against us and like use it publicly. But we didn't back up. We didn't back off. I'm sorry. What was great was that the whole diaspora joined on this fight, and conducting simultaneous protest on the World Bank offices worldwide with a clear message helped a lot, because it showed that we weren't just there because we were against this specific party, but we are there to have better solutions and to actually bring water to all of Beirut. Plus, if I may add here, in the network water of Beirut, there's 48 to 50% of loss because of bad maintenance and bad infrastructure. And we actually conducted a study. It would have costed probably $30 million only, not 800 million, 30, to lower this loss from 60% down to 15% and have increase the quantity of water from 1,000 to million cubic meters. And Lebanon is known that it's rich with groundwater, so they used to throw like false numbers that we don't have water, we don't have this and that, we need to build dams to gather water. But if we had taken care of our wells, of our rivers, of our nature, basically, it would have taken care of us.
Thank you, Samir. I think what's interesting is that you were able in the campaign to make the link between the environmental and the political, with the environmental aspect of things not being like a bubble on its own, but connected to other struggles that we see in the country, and corruption, and how in general business is done in the country. And the other point I'd like to highlight is also it's not just purely like we're not protecting this just for its ecological or environmental value, but it's also affecting livelihoods, it's affecting the region, and it's affecting like future generations, as simple as that. I'd like to move on to another campaign actually with Julien. Can you tell us a bit more about Shikha and the campaign you've been leading there?
Thanks, Christophe. Let me start by saying that this is not our campaign as Greenpeace, and this is very important in the way we work, and we might cover this later on. But it is the campaign led by the Shikha community, and we were there to support. Create a conducive environment for this campaign to be successful, and provide them with the necessary tools, expertise, and maybe even international coverage for that campaign. And I think one major difference between the Shikha campaign, which is an ongoing struggle, it's an ongoing campaign, and the Bisri campaign is that the Bisri campaign, they were successful in making it a national campaign. So let me tell. Sorry, you're right. Let me tell you more about Shikha, the Shikha campaign. So Shikha campaign is basically a group of activists from Shekka, from 2 specific villages in Shekka, they are campaigning against the cement industry in Shekka and all the environmental problems that come with that, and mainly, obviously, air pollution problem. And it's a microcosm of all the power imbalance in Lebanon, because there are corporate interest, political interest, religious interest, all concentrated into one specific industry. And I think it fits very well with the title of this gathering today, David against Goliath. And I think it's a very good representation of that. And this campaign has been going for years and years now, campaigning against the cement industry, asking for this corporation, this industry to be closed, maybe moves to somewhere else. Most of their activities has been illegal. They didn't have any legal licenses to, have these quarries and extraction of sand. And what I was trying to say is that in the case of Bisri, they were able to make it a national campaign. And in our experience working with local groups, one thing that is really a common feature, it's mainly marginalized communities that are at the front line of these campaigns. It's most of the time outside the capital city. And when you say outside the capital city, outside where the power center is, where the media attention is, where most of people live, and therefore are far from the eye, and in a certain way far from the heart of people. And I think there was a good alignment of planet in the case of Bisri, where they were able to also ride the wave of the uprising, and their target was really much become a national target. They were able to rally people like Samuel, who's not even from there, and ended up staying a whole year camping. So that's a very successful example. Whereas in the case of Shekka, we haven't seen that yet, right? And I think this is one of the area of support that we as Greenpeace are trying to provide to the local community over there.
Okay, maybe a very simple question, I think, but I don't think it's easy to answer. Why wasn't it been able to gain much bigger national attention? Although it's well reported, all the pollution that's happening there.
First of all, we need to know that, unfortunately, some media, I'm saying some media, Suzanne, in the country are obviously very close to political parties. And the cement industry, especially in Shekka, has very strong ties with the political ruling class of this country. So that is a main reason behind that. The fact that it's only really affected because there's something we need to. This is about jobs there, right? Because these are ongoing industry that are employing people. Not most of them are from these villages, but they are from the neighboring city, from Tripoli, and therefore it was pitted as an environmental campaign against a social issue, almost, and that's a very hard deadlock to kind of crack. And I think we're talking about that because clearly what we're trying to do is to show that the environmental crisis, like you said, Christophe, is not a silo crisis, is not a crisis in vacuum, but it's a compounded crisis with other kind of crises like we have in Lebanon, such as the economic crisis. So that's why this campaign is particularly difficult. And like I said, there's just an alignment of bad planets in that case, right? You have various political parties which are in practice or in theory not allies, but in practice they are. You have strong media support from these people. Some owner of one of the industry has even started their own natural protected areas in another region. So his image is pretty green. And you have also a religious backing because even one of the religious, the Maronite church, has stakes in one of the industry. So it's all the ingredients for a very sour recipe, I assume.
Thank you, Julien. You touched a bit on the aspect of media. which I think is a perfect segue to talk to Suzanne about the role of media when it comes to covering these things. Basically, if you can tell us a bit in general, why is it important to cover these issues? I think this is clear, but also like how is it important to influence like public opinion basically on what's happening?
Exactly. So I will mostly talk about independent media more than, I think Julien also said that some media are related to political parties, and so they are more influenced. But independent media has been a privileged partner of such campaigns. And I remember that Save Bisri campaign didn't start actually in 2019. It was even before, and it's a very big issue that we have seen in many other areas. Like Janneh, for example, I remember I had followed a lot on this issue, and other dams and other issues concerning water, and it's also related to issues also concerning waste and so on. I also remember the very big campaign against incinerators and so on. So yes, it's important for us when there is a campaign, because we are anyway interested in such issues. But when there is a campaign and there are people working and we have names, faces, and also local people, which was the case in Bisri, so it's much more important for us to be highlighting their action, because they are actually they often don't have access to mainstream media the same way that their opponents do. But on the other hand, I have to say that the journalists do have also their own work to do. For example, when we are not stopping just at covering the campaigns, and it's not doing any good for the campaign or for us to be doing just that. We are in investigating and having our own data, and also becoming ourselves, a source of data. And also we have to verify everything. We have to take all the points of view, which is very important. But on the other hand, also I have to say that we cannot be only although I'm not a fan of telling people what to think. It's not our job, but it's also our job to have a positioning in such issues. We cannot be totally neutral. We cannot. Those are national issues. We're talking about water resources, their distribution to people. And but how do we define this position? This is what's crucial, because we have to know that let's say in the Bisri campaign there were arguments on both sides, and the arguments on the other side were also could have been very influential for people in Beirut who don't have water every day, and so you had leaders of. I don't know, the people in the government and so on, telling them that, shifting the debate towards the campaign is to just wants to preserve a few trees, and then we want to give you water. So this was also an argument that we had to take into consideration for our leadership. How do we take the positioning, and why did we take the positioning more for preservation of Bisri, and that was also in other cases too. It's about sticking to the environmental, very technical, very scientific details of all the aspects of this issue. So we have been talking about where does this water coming to Bisri will be coming from. And we knew that, and we found out that half of it at least will be coming from Maroun, for example, very polluted water. And we also went into the financial details of this issue, and all this very, very technical aspect, and also Samer was talking about. So this is what helps you get a clear positioning, and helps you talk to people, guiding people in a way, in very complex issues. Because as I said, the debates can be shed very easily in this type of issues.
Yeah, thank you. I think one interesting follow-up question would be, what's in the long run, what's the impact of media on such initiatives? Is it like often these protests or these campaigns are very, very long and take a lot of time. So it's important, I think, to see whose story are we telling, and a bit try and understand how can media help in shedding the light on a longer term on these issues.
First, it's very important to understand, fully understand, and deeply understand what the issue is about. It's about water resources. It's about our choices as a nation of how we distribute water and how we preserve our water issue concerning Bisri. But it could be also about waste. It could be also about other issues. So understanding, having a very deep understanding is very important to begin with. Then there must be, I always say there must be a follow-up, a very long follow-up on our side and on the side of the activists, but also on our sides about all the issues we talk about. For example, not letting this very fast news in the country. Things change fast. One issue is making you forget the other, and so on. So this is what's important about having specialized journalism, having people follow up, and having them understand fully. Now, you were saying about whose story are we telling? Of course, here I think we are telling the story of in Bisri we could have from the very local issue to the very wide issue, because there was a whole region that was concerned by it, and you had the capital Beirut that was concerned by it, because what was the pretext about it was to bring water to Beirut. So I think that talking about the local people, talking about the activists was very important, but also we have to know that this is something that touches everyone, and you have to talk about it in this way. Now, having a lot of dams that failed to deliver what they had to deliver was also an indicator of where to look and what to do. So now you had a huge sum of money. You had a very big area that was going to be drowned, and you had sources of water that were suspicious. So all of that, and you had, of course, the tectonic plates that Samer talked about, which is a very, very important issue. So you had many questions that are very crucial for the whole population. So you go from the very local to a much wider audience in this respect.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned like the importance of seeing a bit the bigger picture, and this is also something I think the Bisri campaign was very successful in doing. So I want to move to the next question that I'll ask Unsi. You've published a study a bit mapping like environmental mobilizations in Lebanon with Jibal. First, I think if you can give us a bit of an overview of the study, why did you do so and why you felt it was important? But also, if you can, from the study you did, if you can maybe give us hints as to why some campaigns are successful in tackling and connecting with more systemic and political change, and why some aren't. And maybe that's a very broad question, but if we can
نحن منظمة أو جمعية رسميا بس عمليا مركز أبحاث وتدريب، نشتغل على العدالة البيئية والاجتماعية والصلة بيناتهم، لأنه ما كمان ذكر 100% موصولين. بس كان عبالي أعمل هيك مثل ليست كل المواضيع اللي صار في عليها تحركات آخر 30 سنة، سواء الكسارات وبعدين اللي ذكرته جوليان، التعديات على الأملاك العامة، اللي كان الشواطئ، اللي كان الحدائق، حرج بيروت إلى آخره. هو عمليا عدة تحركات طلعت ريحتكم. السدود كمان، حمانة طبعا، بسري وغيرهم. تلوث الليطاني صار في تحركات. خلينا نقول الاستقلال الغذائي، ما بعرف إذا مسميها تحركات، بس إنه صار في محاولات من تجارب زراعية خلينا نقول. والطاقة كمان يمكن ما بعرف إذا فينا نقول تحركات، بس صار في نوع من نضال حول الكهرباء بشكل خاص والطاقة بشكل عام. من ضمن هول في إضمة، الكسارات عمليا كتير إضمة، يعني بنحكي قبل الحرب الأهلية. النفايات أحدث، والسدود حسب الفترة. التلوث الليطاني كمان شيء قديم، وكلهم عندهم أبعاد بيئية طبعا، بس اجتماعية، وعندهم أبعاد عبالي والحدا منكم ذكر كمان طبقية، أو أنه المناطق المهمشة هي ضحية أكثر من غيرها. أنه بيكفي نطلع ببيروت، يعني وين المكبات، برج حمود والضاحية. فهولي يعني اهتمينا بهالمواضيع أول شيء، لأنهم منن بس عن الطبيعة، بس لأنه هني وقت ما نقول بيئة عم نحكي بيئة طبيعية، بيئة اجتماعية، بيئة سياسية واقتصادية. ولأنه بنعتقد أنه هذا الجو المتشائم منه مزبوط، منه بمحله، أنه صار كتير قصص. وعبالي كمان وصل باللي ذكرتيه أو اللي ذكرتوه، هو أنه دور الإعلام المستقل، ودور أنه يصير في سرديات. هيدي الفكرة، وهيك حنقول على شو هني مكونات ما بعرف الربح أو الإنجاز، أو هيدي وجود سرديات، وجود قصص نجاح، عن جد مكون أساسي. فتتخبر التجارب الناجحة شيء كتير مهم. ذكرت انه عملنا دراسه، وعلى فكره نشرناها عربي انجليزي فرنسي، عن التقرير عن العداله البيئيه بلبنان، بنخبر على هول النضالات. بس هلا عم نشتغل، يمكن معكم سوري ماني اكيد، بس انه عم نشتغل على سرديات ناجحه عن الزراعه البيئيه. اوكي، مع AUB كثير بمحله. لكن لانه اوكي الزراعه البيئيه شيء كثير منا بيعتبر انه سوق طيب للناس المرتاحه الى اخره. لا، مش بس هيك، في اخبار ناجحه من مناطق غير منتظره او غير مسموع عنها، واذا ما بنخبرهم مستحيل ننشر المفهوم. وبشكل عام اول خلينا نقول عائق او اول حجه بيواجهونا فيها أصحابنا اللي عم نجرب نقنعهم بمسألة معينة، اللي كان تحرك شعبي أو اللي كان تغيير تصرف من النفايات للزراعة، هي شو عم تحكي؟ إنه مش حتزبط، ما زبطت، بلا زبطت وهون وهون وهون. بس تنقدر نقول زبطت لازم نعرف. ففي دور الإعلام، وفي دور المؤسسات اللي تشتغل بحث، من بيناتهم NCC. منيح ذكرت الكل. بس بالفعل مش بس وهون بدي انتقد نحن جميعا هون، مش بس بالقيام على العمل البحث، بس بنشره ونشره. وهالقاعة كتير حلوة وبشكركم عليها، بس لازم نلاقي طرق ننشر هالأخبار شوي أبعد من هون. ما بعرف بأي طريقة، دعايات على LBC مثلا، ما بعرف. بس هيدي هيدا مكون أساسي للنجاح. بدي أكمل على هيدي النقطة بشكل خاص. وهون اللي لاحظناه، علما أنه كنت عم تحكي عن كواكب alignments of the planets، أنه في قصص ما بنعرف ليه تنجح أو لا، بس أنه مكونات مشتركة خلينا نقول تجارب ناجحة أو جزئيا ناجحة. هنعتبر بسري ناجحة مثلا. هن عادة المبادرة محلية. ناس من المجتمع المحلي، من الضياع، من المناطق اللي هن اجمالا مناطق مهمشه. فبدون هالمبادره الشرعيه ما بتعيد موجوده. وهذا التوب داون، يعني الوصول من العاصمه مع كل الافكار هيك المجرده او الفلسفيه اجمالا، اذا هيدي الميله بتبادر صعب. فمبادره محليه صراحه محتاجين ناس مستغلين بكامل ارادتهم. فلازم يكون كم شخص محركين مستعدين يسكنوا بالمكان على مدة سنة مثلا، أو مستعدين وقادرين يكرسوا وقتهم. وهيدي المحركين ممكن يكون ناس من الضيعة، ممكن يكون ناس من الخارج، ما بعرف كيف بتصير، في عدة تجارب. بس محتاجين لناس نفسهم كثير طويل وعندهم القدرة كذلك، والتواصل مع الخارج. وهون بحس ما بعرف، بس بحس بوضع شكل غير العوائق اللي ذكرتها، التسييس والتدين والما اعرف شو، كذلك يمكن التواصل مع الخارج كان اصعب، ما بعرف. بس هيدي يعني تشبيك مع تجارب او نضالات تانية ماشيه كتير كتير بيساعد لحتى يسلط الأضواء على مسألة معينة. وبنعرف إنه بس تتسلط الأضواء فجأة المسؤولين بيصير وضعهم أصعب شوي.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to talk a bit about networking, but you already did. I'm gonna take you back a bit to the importance of small initiatives and of successes. Not only, I think, because you mentioned it mostly to show what works and that things work, but also to show what we actually want, and that actually. But then, I think the next step would be our role in decision making. I think so. There are initiatives, there are ways that we want to do things that are different, maybe than what's being imposed on us. But we often don't have a role to play, or at least a word like. And we don't have our say in decision making in the end. So how to bridge this gap, basically?
يعني كيف لبنان ما يعيد فاسد؟ هذا السؤال. اوكي، ما بعرف. اوكي، بس برضه حرد شوي، لانه عائق اساسي صراحه، وكثير كثير هذا الشيء ما بعرف مجزر بلبنان، مش بس بلبنان، بس انه كثير موجود ومشكله اساسيه. هلا اللي عم نشوفه انه التحركات المحليه في دور اساسي للبلديات، ان كان على فكره ايجابي او سلبي. ممكن يكون دعم، والبلديات ممكن مثلا بوضع حمانه بتخيل البلديه اللي هي رفعت دعوه، وممكن يكون عائق، ممكن يكون ما بعرف احكي عن مناطق ثانيه. في مناطق ثانيه البلديه لها او ساعتها هون البلديه بتنخلط شوي هي والشخصيات، لهم اسهم، لهم دور، لهم مصلحه. فهون الشق الاقتصادي والمالي بيلعب دور، بيصيروا البلديات خصم. فهون وبتخيل اوكي كمان ما اخترعتها في اللادي وفي حمله بلدياتي بالتسعينات، بس انه البلديات مستوى وله الى حد ما هيك انه نفوذ دور. فهون بعتقد هيدي يعني نحقق المواجهه ممكن نربح في شيء. اوكي، فنداء ترشحوا على البلديات من هلا لسنه، ما بعرف، الله بيعرف. بس انه صراحه اوكي ماني عم بقول انا من بلديه من افسد بلديات لبنان، بس برضه حنجرب نحن ومجموعه حدا يترشح على البلديه ان شاء الله، مش انا. بس عن جد انه ما قصدي اضغط، بس انه عم بضغط انه عن جد ترشحوا على البلديات، خصوصا اذا بيحق لكم. فانه استعملوا هذا الحق اللي عندكم، لانه مش كل المقيمين بلبنان بيحق لهم يعملوا هالشيء. ف هلا اعلى من هيك هون بنوصل لدور يعني كنا عم نحكي عن تشبيك التحركات المحليه والتحركات على الصعيد الأكبر، عم بحكي على لبنان أو الدولي مثل ما مثلا جرين بيس بيعملوا. ليش؟ لأنه هيدا بيسمح لضغط على السلطات، وفي جزء من السلطات من بيناتن السلطات اللبنانية، بس من بيناتن بعتذر سلف، بس إنه البنك الدولي وصندوق النقد الدولي ما بيردوا إلا على ضغوطات. فهون بيجي دور مؤسسات مثل الجهات المانحة التقدمية شوي، أو المؤسسات اللبنانية أو المحلية بس اللي هي عندها إمكانية إنه توصل لسلطات أكبر من البلديات، إنه تضغط. هلا طرق ضغط صراحة أنتم بتخيل اللي أقرب للمؤسسات الدولية اللي أنت على يميني وعلى شمالي عندكم أكثر تخبروا. بس المختصر المفيد إنه فوق البلديات محتاجين لضغط، مناصرة، مظاهرات على صعيد الكوكب، ضغوطات فيها تكون ابتزاز، ما بعرف بويكوت، صار ضد نسلة، صار ضد غيرها. فهيك آخر نقطة فيني أذكرها من اللي شفناه هو إنه بشكل شوي أنا ما كنت منتظر صراحة، بس الوزارات إجمالا انذكرت وقت كنا عم نشتغل على التحركات المحلية، وكمان مش إنه عندها السلطة، بس بعدد نادر من الحالات انذكرت بطريقة إيجابية، وحتى صار في مواجهة بين وزارات الثقافة والبيئة والأشغال العامة وإلى آخره. هلا ما بتخيل فينا نترشح على الوزارات، بس يمكن على صعيد هيك تحركاتنا المحلية ما ننساهن كليا. من وقت لوقت بيظهر بالنظام الدولي اللبنانية ناس كفؤين هن بموقع عندهم إلى حد ما سلطة. فبس هيك إنه تذكير إنه موجودين وممكن يعملوا شيء. هون ما بنصح التفاؤل، بس بنصح إنه ما ننساهن. عن جد أنا تفاجأت صراحة، بس إنه إيجابيا يعني في عدد قليل من الحالات.
Thank you, Unsi. Why did I bring up the question of decision making? I think because one of the aspects of environmental justice, I think that we often forget, it's not only about who's being affected by certain by a lack of resources, or who's controlling resources, or who's being affected by pollution, but also who has a say in decision making. I think this is often a point that we forget. So we're not just fighting, or it's not just about wanting to reach like a certain goal, but also having a say in where we want to reach. We talked a bit about networking between initiatives at the local level. I think what would be interesting also is to talk about like networking or more regional issues, such like on issues that affect the region, not only locally, such as climate change or the biodiversity crisis. So I'd like to ask Julien a bit about this and his experience with Greenpeace, for example, on these types of campaigns, and whether it is something that's usually successful in Lebanon or it's a bit too abstract, for example.
Yeah. First of all, Greenpeace MENA is a regional office, is a regional organization. So our whole approach is very much regional. And by working with different groups across the region, we noticed that there's a lot of commonalities between the struggles, and there would be a lot of benefits of connecting them together. Because a lot of these groups have much more experience and expertise that we have as Greenpeace sometimes, because it's about a very local issue that requires local expertise. And by simply connecting them together, they can be transferring that kind of expertise, that kind of knowledge between them, but also the power of solidarity. To feel that there are other marginalized community in another country having the same struggle can be also a powerful vector of mobilization, right? So we try as much as we can to try to connect these groups together. One thing that we did last year is we co-organize with about 30 organizations the first international climate justice camp. Last year it was in Tunisia, this year is in Lebanon. And the idea here is, first of all, focus on the global south, priority to the MENA region and the African region, and then Latin America and Southeast Asia. And we're bringing advocates, activists from across these countries to come together, network, build connections, but also exchange information, exchange expertise, and co-strategize together. Why co-strategize together? Because many of these struggles, sometimes the key is not only local. Sometimes you need also a solution at a bigger level. So one example is the climate conference coming. It's not a silver bullet. It's just some complicated words on a paper, but sometimes it provides a hook for campaign, right? And through this camp, these mainly youth advocates come together and strategize on how they can have impact in such spaces. And we find that to be very, very, very powerful. If you allow me, can I add something on the previous question, or on many of the previous questions? We were also involved in another campaign against the incinerator in Beirut, that's Zakaru. As Greenpeace, we were supporting the Waste Management Coalition, which was created back then. Everything before Corona for me is blank, but something like that. 2016, 2015, and I'm part of that coalition also individually. And the idea of providing hope. This campaign was a great example because you don't necessarily need to win the campaign. What, in the case of the Beirut incinerator, we delayed it. What won the campaign was the economic crisis. And that should provide hope because by simply the fact of delaying, at that time we were thinking, oh, we're not able to win it. Things are moving too slow. Well, if things move slow, that's a good point because they are losing money and things can change. If you imagine if there was not that campaign and the incinerator passed, now with the economic crisis, what would have happened? Because it's a very expensive technology. They're not even able now to manage the sector by just paying the people. Imagine that we have an incinerator in Beirut, again, marginalized area, probably Quarantina, that now does not have enough money to maintain and to operate it. And definitely they would have kept throwing waste to burn them there because it would have been the easy solution without applying the right filters, the right maintenance. So it would have been a catastrophe. So that's a win. And we delayed it. By we, I mean not only the Waste Management Coalition, but there were a lot of other groups in it. So that should provide also hope that sometimes delaying is a tactic, right? And I think this a lot of struggles and campaign need to maybe look back at this as an example, just like Bisri is an example. I think to mention one partner, you haven't mentioned ARI in the room as well. In an ARI event last year, Simon was there as well, talking about Bisri, and you can see how it set a precedent for the region. It was an example for the region, and it was put forward as a struggle, environmental struggle, that ended up in a win, which had the coverage people knew about beyond Lebanon, and that has a very, very positive impact.
Thank you, and thank you for going back. I think it also goes a bit in the direction of the question I had asked about longevity, I think, and that's exactly it. You brought up a bit the issues of climate change and the conference of the parties. I know that Suzanne has covered many of them, and I think I want to ask a question. I think for a lot of us don't really know what happens there, and actually what is Lebanon's stance, actually? What do we go to do there as a country, actually? No, it's a very...
Couldn't I get him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's happy. The question is for me.
So yeah, I think this that's a nice parenthesis to open, I think.
Yes, actually we are in these kind of conferences very big. It's like more than 190 countries, and so countries are rarely individual over there. So except if you're China or America or you know, those very big players, very big polluters, we are part of the Arabic group. I know that our delegation often try to have differentiated positions, because Lebanon is more of a victim of climate change than, I mean, now we're talking about, you know, gas and oil, but but actually we're not an oil country, but this Arab group is mostly influenced by big oil countries, and so we are in this discussion. We are also in the group of most vulnerable countries, I think, and so we're not. Of course, we're a very small polluter on the global. And so, yes, I mean, we are present there. Now, media is not very present there. So this is, we are often very few journalists over there. And what is very, I'm sorry to say, is that the public also is not very interested in this, thinking it's a very big question that we have no control of or whatsoever. And there's also a misunderstanding about climate change. Every time there's too much heat or too much. It's not just that. It's much more complicated than that. And so it's always a challenge for journalists to bring this issue closer to people by telling stories, by you know, trying to have simpler information, getting. To get to people, and the negotiations. We don't only focus, like I wouldn't only focus on Lebanon. I would focus also on larger matters that are discussed over there, like for the last matter that was discussed. The only maybe a little positive that came out of Sharm el-Sheikh last year was the loss and damage issue that was you know, voted, and so this is important for countries like us who might have big damage for climate change, and it's also a very, very political, financial issue. So
yeah, please.
Maybe I can add to that, because I've been going to the COP, and I will go to this COP again. And I've been also working closely with the Lebanese delegation. Actually, one of the things to point out is the Lebanese delegation are one of the delegations that give badges, like party badges to NGOs. So that's a good point. And I know actually the lead negotiators that we have, the team, which are a very capable technical team, and have a lot of experience at the COP. And it's very important. These are national delegations. And if they go there and there's not national agenda, there's not much they can do, right? Because they represent the country. They cannot go just there and take the floor and say we are for that or against that, because there's no real national agenda behind it. So the way I've seen is that actually they deploy a lot of effort to make the most out of these opportunities, because through these big conferences and big conventions, there's also countries, Lebanon, a vulnerable country that can benefit from the loss and damage fund, for example, that can benefit from receiving climate finance for mitigation, for renewable energy development, for example. And this is where a delegation like the Lebanese delegation is active, from what I've seen, much more than actually taking the floor and because there's no national backing to that, right? And they cannot take a stand if it is not the prime minister and the government stand, for example, which we know are not really looking at all these stories. So I do not envy their position, but I think from what I've seen, it's you know, they're doing a good job on that front. And it's correct for media, because obviously, there's a lot of media at the COP, but not so much from our part of the world. I think last year, because it's been in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was a bit more interest from media from the region, and now even probably maybe in Dubai. But, and here I'm talking under your supervision, kind of, is that I've noticed those big international media, they have specialized journalists. Like they have, they send journalists which are specialized on climate negotiations even, right? Whereas here we know, Suzanne is one of them, we know the couple of media, but the rest of the media, maybe there's no interest because actually they don't have the capacity to able to cover these kind of things, because these are very complicated matters. And I've been working a lot with Suzanne trying to, make sense of everything and being able to be the voice, not only for, to report back in Lebanon, but also in the region. These are very complicated and unfortunately elitist area, restricted area. And sometimes I feel they make it complicated on purpose. So people get bored and they won't be interested in following. Just to add a bit.
Okay, thank you. I think staying on the topic of climate change, I just want to ask one more question to Samir, and then maybe we can take questions from the audience and from people who are following us on I was going to say Instagram, on WebEx. So yeah, on the topic of climate change, as I see it, at least me in Lebanon, and I might be completely wrong, as when it comes to climate activism, it's not really about climate activism. It's about actually it's about water management. It's about food sovereignty. It's about things that will be affected basically by a changing climate. Is this something you think is true as an activist on the ground, or do you think is there a bigger popular movement that's asking what we're doing for this?
I don't think it's a yes or no question, or that's wrong, or that's the correct way to do it. But as everyone mentioned, when we talk about climate change or climate justice, we also talk about social justice. So technically, like the way I see it and the way I believe we can penetrate people's minds or hearts is whenever we make the problem personal. So whenever we come and say, okay, now if we continue living this way or conducting our lives this way, we will definitely be affected by the climate change, and not only the change of climate. As we can see today, there's a lot of water issues because of pollutions, and with that comes soil pollution. With soil pollution comes food pollution. So technically we're affecting our food security, or as you said, food sovereignty. And all these issues are mostly political, if not all political. So the only way to attract or bring more people towards that movement is to show how it will affect them. And unfortunately, these issues like climate issues always affect the most vulnerable than to the least vulnerable. So in a way, most people don't care because they don't, I wouldn't say care, actually, they're not aware of what the climate could affect or how it could hurt them. So the more and more we talk about it, the more and more it's shared on media or organizations, or even such talks, but conducted not only to people that are interested in the environment. I believe people that are here today are people mostly interested in the environment or has a background in the environment. But if we conduct such talks in areas that are not aware of it, maybe at this point we would have a proper answer for this question. I would say, yes, this is the proper way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for the four of you. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything before we take any questions. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just raise your hands, those who have questions.
لا قصدي حدا قبلك بس قصدي لمين وجه
بعد ما توجه. لمين السؤال؟ Hello. لا تفضل.
Hello. Okay. Thank you for the great discussion. Thank you to my colleagues at NCC and my friends also at the HBS. So I have just a couple follow-ons. Onsi, I wanted to respond to something you're saying, which I completely agree with, but just to add a little bit more and to also clarify what NCC has been doing for the past period. We've been trying to focus on this issue of research not being brought to communities, because this is very fundamental to why these just sit in journals, nothing is really done with them, and it's a loss of potential, actually. So we really went hard on doing citizen science work. So this is science done with people that didn't do scientific training, but can contribute to what are the questions we're trying to answer. And actually they can help get the data to answer those questions also. So we did a lot of that. So I think the bigger question though became, after years of trying to do this, is not how can we make research more applicable, but how can we bring less baggage to the table, especially from the side of experts and academia that are coming to collaborate with the community. Because we come in as if we are answer providers, but we're not. We are technical people, and the local knowledge and the context of how this issue is playing out is at times more valuable even than what the academic expert is bringing to the table. So how to bring less baggage even while you're bringing knowledge and data around an issue is key. Secondary for the community also, they come in sometimes with baggage of the development aid that's been given to them previously. Cash for work programs. People show up thinking that they're going to get paid for workshops. These are the amazing struggles that we have to deal with when we're trying to do these collaborative works. Of course, we still need to keep trying, but it's difficult. It's tricky with all of this load on the table. But the other thing I wanted to hit on is on the Shekka activism that was going on. I'm very curious to know, we were talking about how the Bisri Dam was so relatable for people in Beirut, because it's water for them, etc., etc. Well, I think the Shekka extraction that's happening is very relatable to people across the country, because it's a primary income provider for the power figures in the country. And did you try to approach the activism from this lens, to see if, this is a primary way for us to cut the flow that comes into these powerful figures? And the last thing I wanted to say is just on the imaginative and the power of that. And I think I was personally moved by a couple of the imaginatives that was brought up. One by you, Samir, which is to say that, what if the earthquake, Samir, my bad, Samir. What if the earthquake had happened, and the Bisri Dam was built and there was a massive collapse, which was the big warning that was given around this development. And then also for the incinerator, okay, if this was built and there was the economic collapse, for sure, this would have been a pollution nightmare. So the power of the imaginative to drive activism, I think, is great. And I just wanted to highlight those two examples that y'all already said. Thank you.
Okay, I think we take a few questions and then we answer them all, or yeah, I mean, okay.
I don't know where the question was. He said a lot of things, but to talk about the earthquake in specific, and actually 1956, an earthquake happened there with a magnitude of 8.6, and it resulted in massive destruction. So after this year, people from the local area, they signed like ta'ahudet, commitments, and asking whoever, like future generations, never build anything there, never change anything with the land. So we also used this as an argument, but we were fighting fierce political parties.
There were also taxes for the building موجودة بالهيدا. Okay, so أنا بدي وائل. بدي جاوب. Okay, so I have two questions. One for Samer. أنت كأكتيفيست أكيد في عندك باكج لأنه أكيد وقت رحت كرمال تعمل أكتيفيزم ما كنت عارف شو المخاطر اللي رح تجيك، بس بعدين مع الوقت صرت تعرف إنه في أشياء مثل ضغوطات سياسية وغيرها، فكونت حولك باكج معين. فإذا عندك فورمولا معينة لأشخاص هني بدهم يبلشوا أكتيفيزم، شو معقول يكونوا هني بحاجة لهم؟ وبالنسبة لجوليان كيف بتقيم الربح؟ لأنه من 2016 لل 2023 نحن بعدنا بأزمة نفايات، كل معامل الفرز يلي تمولت بآلاف ومليارات الدولارات واقفة عن العمل، ما بتشتغل، وحتى إذا اشتغلت هي عم تطلع برودكت منهم، هذا البرودكت هو منه سالبل وما بيعمل ميتينج للكونسيومر. يعني إذا عم نحكي عن الكومبوست نكون أكتر سبيسيفيك، من ايام سكلين لهلا بعده الكومبوست شو دي سيئه ما بيطابق شروط المزارع، فكيف بتقيم الربح؟
Thank you so much for this fruitful lecture. I'm very interested to know, I'm very curious to know about those who are affected from the easement industries. They are affected in cancer disease. So most of the people here in Lebanon, they never even know about the average, because we heard about the highest average in Lebanon. And this is so dangerous because we never even try to highlight these issues. We always try to neglect this. And the Lebanese people just like, they take it like a bitter pill hard to swallow. And because this related to political issues, and we cannot even try to change this. And it would take so long. So what is your perspective regarding to this? Thank you.
Let's answer the questions that we have already. There's first the one. So I'll try to answer the question of Shekka and your question together. وبعدين كيف نقيم الربح بعدين. About Shekka, first of all, it's important to explain how we work as Greenpeace MENA around this campaign. Because like I said, these are not our campaign. And the last thing we want is like barge in like, okay, the hippies are here, we'll take over, and we have a strong brand and we all shine, whatever happens. So it's really much about, first of all, if they need our help. So it's not like, ooh, Bisri is working well, it's going to be a win, let's jump in and take some credit. So and it's what kind of need they basically they're asking for, like what kind of support. And in the case of Shekka, you're right. If you go there, actually, as a person who's been, in the environmental field for a long time, and even when I was doing my academic path in the environment, I've never actually been there. I mean, I've been to Shekka, but I haven't really. I've passed next to them. I've just looked at them, but I haven't been really there. And by there, I don't mean where the quarries are, but actually where the people live, right? And if you go there, and I don't know if there are studies to back that up, but every family that you speak to, they say they have a cancer case. In Fia, for example, is one of the village. Our executive director happens to be from there, so she feels very passionate about this. So I went with her there. Every person, every family. I mean, obviously that's an overstatement, but a lot of families have multiple, sometimes, cases of cancer, even among young people. So yes, there were very scenic images that people can relate to, but at the same time, it's the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. And if they close there, because people think we cannot live without cement, and you need to have a cement industry, you need to create cement, they might open elsewhere. And Lebanon being such a small country, they might open in a backyard of another village as well. So I think that is one of the, for me, I'm speculating, but that might one of the reasons that people, did not want to associate with that. And even the people there that say close and open elsewhere, right? Not even close, like it's not like close forever, close and open elsewhere. Now it's been clear that actually the cement that we import is even cheaper than the one that they produce. So just even that does not make economic sense. But definitely, we felt that there was a lot of cancer case. What we did as a support to them is that they said, okay, let's support us all more with actual figures, with numbers, something that we can, because contradict sometimes and like build our case. So we got we were able to ship a air pollution monitor, and we placed it in a couple of places, and our Greenpeace laboratory research, Greenpeace research laboratories, which are based in Exeter in the UK, in the university there, work with the Parliament University, and actually develop a report that the group released last year during a press conference, which was not very well attended by the media, unfortunately. And that report showed that almost 2/3 of the year, the WHO standard for PM 2.5, with it's a fine particulate matter, it's a pollutant, were crossed by a lot. And obviously that creates all kind of illnesses and disease, and that the measurement we're taking at a time where the cement industry was not that active anymore because of the crisis. They were still kind of doing it at night, but that came from the quarries because it was just dust now, and they didn't do it properly, and obviously all the dust remains in the air with the wind. And what was interesting is that actually there was not a lot of media to the press conference, but the cement industry sent representatives, which was a very good signal to us, because it means that they fear what was going out. And I mean, the way they interacted, some of them was a bit disruptive to the whole thing, and trying even to disrupt basically scientific proof, right? And we were not saying even that the PM 2.5, we're not linking it directly to the cement industry, because we have to be very careful about science, right? And that's not what the study proved, but it proved that the pollution was unusually high in that region where you have nothing else, right? You just have cement industries. So regarding, how do we measure a win? First of all, something that we need to always remind ourselves as civil society organization is that if you do to the waste sector, it's not our responsibility. If the waste management sector is such in a despair, it's not our responsibility, right? And that's a failure of the state. Unfortunately, in this country, we're used that the NGO plays the role of the state, so we take it for something natural, and that's not healthy. And that's why also what we need to try to focus is for systemic change rather than localized solution only. That's a very important point, because that can create despairs. Like, despite everything we did, well, it's not our responsibility to collect waste, right? Some are doing it, it's amazing, but it's not our responsibility. And as long as we bail the government in that case, we're also giving them incentive not to do it, right? But in the case of the incinerator, it was a very specific campaign with a very specific objective, which is do not allow an incinerator to be built in Lebanon, specifically also in Beirut. And the fact that the project was abandoned, at least now, that for us was a victory. And it's not about only what was our impact, because like I said, we were not the one who kind of closed it, but we were the one who were a pain. I was going to say a bad word, but we're a problem. We're a bit an issue for the head of municipality, that we were able to delay it for years until the economic crisis hit, and that for us is a win. that we can take credit for. But at the same time, we cannot take the blame for the very poor situation of the waste management. And I think that's a very important point that people need to understand, because sometimes they blame the civil society first. It's like, شو عم تعملوا انتو? Well, we do what we can, and in the end, there's two key things that we need to be very comfortable about: accountability and responsibility. And these two things do not lie with us. These two things lie with the government, and they need to remain at the government level. And what we need to do is to push them and pressure them to make their own work and be held accountable for what they're responsible for.
Yeah, actually, yeah. كان يعني سامي حكى عن كيف نوصل للأبحاث، ذكرتوا السرطان، وبنفس الوقت ذكرت بس هيدي فكرة السيناريوهات اللي عملتوها، إنه لو مشي هودي المحارق شو كان صار، لو مشي سد بسري، هو كلهم سرديات، أخبار، قصص من ضمنهم نتائج الابحاث. هلا انت ذكرت عن تكوين الابحاث، كيف عم تجربوا تدخلوا المجتمعات وكذا، وفكره انه اللي بدي هلا اركز عليه وشوي حكيت عنه هو كيف يوصلوا كل الاخبار اللي عم تحكوها، السيناريوهات اللي ما صارت والنتائج الابحاث. وحقيقه مزبوط انه في كل الوقت بنقول وبنسمع انه نسبه السرطان بلبنان من اكبر. طب ويني هالدراسه؟ ايه وين الارقام غير الدراسات او البرسبشن ستادي اللي هلا ذكرتها، انه ايه كلنا عنا عيال، كلنا في حاله سرطان. فهي انا بعتقد صراحه عندنا مسؤوليه، وعم هذا النقد ذاتي، لانه نحن هلا مين سمع منكم بالدراسه اللي عم خبركم عنها عن العداله البيئيه بلبنان؟ هي غلط. سو جبال.org. بس انه كمان برضو ما لازم تروحوا على الويب سايت، لازم نعمل افلام، لازم نعمل. ما بعرف حقيقه مين في اختصاصي اعلام هون يخبرنا كيف نعمل فيديوهات دقيقه تصير فايرل وتغرق الانترنت بالفيوز. فهيدي كان بدي ما بعرف نداء انه اعطونا افكار، لانه لازم هالقصص عن جد، نتائج الابحاث، الارقام، وهلا انا فكره جديده اللي بس انه السيناريوهات الكارثيه اللي كانت صارت لو قدر النظام اللبناني يوصل لغايته. عن جد لازم توصل للناس. كان بس تعقيبا على اللي قلته، انه معودين انه مش الدوله اللي بتشتغل. اوكي، هلا اليوم نحن لنا شي 10-15 سنه بهيدي ظاهره الان جي اوز، سوري انه كلنا بنشتغل فيها او جزء كبير منها، بس انه قبلها كان في الاحزاب، وقبلها كان في الطوائف والاقطاع. تاسست الدوله هيدي اللي نحن عايشين فيها اليوم، اللي موجوده وحقيقيه بدون اي شك، بس تاسست 1920 ضعيفه. اوكي، انعطى من العثمانيين، الفرنسيين، اللبنانيين، السوريين، اللي هو سلطه تنفيذيه لطوائف مع محاكم الى اخره، وللاقطاع، وبعدين عم نورث هيدا الشيء عبر الاحزاب، عبر التيارات السياسيه، عبر الزبائنيه، وهلا الظاهره الجديده اللي هي التمويل الخارمي. كان في الدين بالتسعينات، وهلا صار تمويل، لانه طبعا ما بقى حدا يدين. فانه انه هيك بس كرمال تنراضي نفسنا شوي، انه عم نحارب شيء قديم وكتير قوي. الدوله اللبنانيه فاشله من تاسيسها. النظام اللبناني بالمقابل كتير قوي، عنده قدره تحمل هائله، انه مثل ما كنتم شايفين. يعني ما بعرف اذا في افشل من هيك دوله واقوى من هيك نظام. مش يعني شفنا كتير نجاحات وانجازات وابحاث، مش يعني ما لازم تنشر وما لازم يكون في تفاؤل، بس انه هيك ما ننتقد نفسنا بكتير قساوه.
Thank you. There's the question that was addressed to Samir on like a sort of, what can you tell activists that want to start their activism, basically how to be an activist, a recipe to start. Let's be a bit brief in the answers.
هذا سؤال حلو، في طريقتين جاوبك عليهم. Like there's a romantic answer and a technical answer. A romantic answer, it's the fast one. you need to love and be passionate about what you are actually fighting, and consistent in everything. I mean, and the technical answer clearly with data, with research, with following up, with يعني بتجيب اختصاصيين بتحكي معهم بتحط نقاط انه ليش صح ليش غلط شو اللي بيفيد وشو اللي ما بيفيد من هيدا المشروع اذا تم تأسيسه او لا. بس بنفس الوقت يعني ذكرت انه الاشياء اللي واجهناها ونحن فعلا واجهنا اشياء قاسية ومرب شرسة يعني مثل ما بيقولوا لدرجة التهديد الشخصي. ينبعثوا مناصرين يكسروا لنا اشياء نملكها من سيارات للخيام الاخيره. ولاخر وقت من مشروع بسري وكل هيدا الخبريه فوتوا حزب السلاح بلبنان فوتوه معهم لدرجه انه طلعوا ويعملوا مؤتمرات صحفيه وانه احنا الجماعه عم نمنع المي توصل على لبنان. هن بيقدروا يعملوها هيدي هول الطرق تبعهم بيقدروا يجمعوا العالم تبعهم تيصيروا ضدك زياده. بس بفتكر هون الرومانسي بيربح على التكنيكال ووقتها تفرجئ انه عن جد في حب وفي شغف وفي استمراريه ليش نحن ضد بتنجح العمليه.
Thank you all for the panel. When Christophe and I were working on this panel, one of the main conclusions or questions we had is that these campaigns really seem to be limited to a project and to the project's timeline. And therefore, we saw that it was easier to get, at least in the case of Lebanon, to get people to rally against a project rather than rally around the vision. And this is definitely not sustainable because, as you can see, sometimes campaigns fail or they succeed. And just a basic example, which is the تعديات على المملكة البحرية, we've had the Eden Bay campaign that failed, and now we're seeing what's happening to Abu Ali. So there's no mechanized or systematized approach to preventing these projects later on. So I just wanted to get your comments on this dynamic. I know in the absence of the state, it's almost impossible to think of sustainability, but I'm wondering whether we should expect these campaigns to transcend the field and start looking into integrating the state. Thank you.
اوكي شكرا للبانل على المعلومات اللي شاركتونا فيها. السؤال، في حدا من شكا او من بسري من اللي كانوا ناشطين من الجراس روت؟ لا، من هونيكي يلي اشتغلوا، لانه هن اشتغلوا على الحمله من زمان، او مطمر شو اسمه الناعمه يلي اشتغلوا هونيك، لانه في او مقلع عين دارة، لانه هودي محلات صار في شغل وصار في نتيجه وصارت من الاهالي. يعني بمطمر الناعمه يمكن قبل بشي 5 سنين من 2015 وتعرضوا لكتير ضغوطات. بال 2015 قدروا يوقفوه، بس كان في حركه كتير كبيره قبل. في حدا هون يمكن بيقدر يفيدنا يعطينا معلومات شوي زياده كمان. الشغله الثانيه اللي لها علاقه بالاعلام، في هلا هون سوزان يلي بعرفها من زمان، يلي بتشتغل كتير على موضوع الاعلام بطريقه مناقبيه، بس للاسف مش هو هذا واقع الاعلام عندنا بلبنان. يعني هو بيقولوها علنا ببعض الاوقات وقت بيكونوا صريحين انه لا الاعلام بده داعم، والداعم ممكن يكون يا اما جهه سياسيه بوضعنا بلبنان والاعلانات. بس لاعطيكم مثل على الجاستس تبع الميديا، احضروا التيفيات قبل الاخبار، هذا البيك تايم، شوفوا الدعايه لمين بتكون، اي بنك تحديدا. نحن باي ازمه شوفوا الاعلام عم بيروج لمين. وهيئه المصارف بتعرفوا في هاي الاعلام انه شو بيكون بتدميرها، لا هي العماد لانتشار الوطن من محل ما هو. بالاعلام حتى بال 2015 وقت كانت مشكله النفايات استعين باعلاميين بيئيين ليحاربوا الناشطين بالحمله البيئيه، يعني دفع لهم مصاري وصاروا على المنصات وصاروا يهاجمونا والى ما هنالك. بقى بموضوع شكا بمنتصف التسعينات بعز الاعمار بلبنان رئيس الحكومه المرحوم رفيق الحريري على راس حكومته بيعملوا قانون بيمنعوا استيراد الاسمنت من لبنان، وعلى اثره صار سعر الاسمنت بلبنان وصل لل $110 الطن. كانت نفس الشركه اللي عم بتبيعه ب $110 للطن للبناني كانت عم بتصدره ب $55 على العراق مثلا. نعم 23. انا بعرف انه بالعراق تصدر ب $55 وكان عم بيربح معهم. الفرق من ال 55 لل 110 عم بيروح للتغطيه، للاعلام، للسياسيين المستفيدين الى ما هنالك. بقى نحن الحمله هي صعبه، يمكن مهم انه يصير في ضغط. هلا صار عندنا نواب انه مفروض بالمجلس هالقانون بس يتغير. حمله عين دارة كانت على اساس انه جاي الاعمار تبع سوريا ولبنان هو بده يعمرها من عين دارة. بقى لا، ما في داعي اذا سكروا مقالع مش مزبوطه بمناطق مش مزبوطه بلبنان انه رح تنتقل لمناطق تانية مش مزبوطه بلبنان. لا، في حلول كثيره. شكرا.
This here and 2 here. Okay.
We take 2 more questions and then we'll take questions that are online and I think we'll have to close.
مساء الخير. اسمي منير أبلان، صحافي بيئي ومختص في القانون البيئي. أول شيء بتشكركم على هيدا الندوة والمتحدثين والمشاركين، لأنه هيدا البرين ستورمينج اللي كنا بنعمله بيفيدنا وبيضوي على نقط يمكن ما بنكون نحن منتبهين لها. أنا بالنسبة لي كصحافي بيئي بكتب أنا برصيف 22 بالموضوع البيئة وبالمواضيع الاجتماعية اللبنانية. الفكرة انه حتى قبل ما اكون برصيف لما كنا بتي في نشتغل وبريدو قبل، لما نحكي موضوع بيئي العالم بتفكر انه هودي جماعة اللي بيشتغلوا بالبيئة فاضيين لوقتهم، ما عندهم شيء يعملوا، رايحين يتسلوا، انه اوكي بنعبي وقتنا بالبيئة. بالوقت اللي نحن اكثر ناس عم نشعر كنا بالخطر، لانه يعني نظرتنا للامور كانت على الارض نشوف المشاكل اللي عم نشعها، فكان عم بيخلي شيء جواتنا لانه نتحرك ونحكي ونكتب ونصور والى ما هنالك. فموضوع البيئة منه موضوع نخبوي، يعني هو مش صالون بيجتمعوا في ناس وبيقوموا بيحكوا بقصص مثل الناس اللي معها كتير مصاري وبدها تفكر بهذا الموضوع. لا، هذا موضوع لأنه بمس الناس. برأيي في مشكلة بالوعي، يعني هيدا الوعي عند هيدا الناس، في مشكلة بالوعي انه انت بس تكتب مقال بيئة او تحكي بالبيئة، في ناس لك شو باله هلا، انه باله بشجرة حدا اجى قصة انه بيعمل منها مشكلة، او حدا نزل لوث النهر او البحر او الى ما هنالك. لما نحن نعمل هيدا الوعي عند الناس، ولما المواطن اللبناني بيشعر انه اذا اليوم خربت بشجرة او بجبل، حفرت او الى ما هنالك، او حرقت هون لجبل الزبالة ولع، مثل عم بيصير بصيدا. يعني تخيلوا انتم معمل الفرز بصيدا قبل ما يحترق، الروائح الكريهه والملوثات عم توصل كانت لنص جنوب، فما بالكم بالحرق اللي عم بيصير. اذا المواطن ما شعر انه اي شيء عم بيصير بمس بالطبيعه باي بقعه بلبنان هالقد كتير صغير، يعني اذا صارت المشكله بصيدا ما حدا يفكر ما حتوصل على الجبل او على اخر جنوب او حتى على بيروت. فبده الانسان يحس، وهذا الشيء بيلعب دور الاعلام. حكي الاستاذ نقطه كتير مهمه بموضوع انه كيف بنظهر هذا الشيء بالاعلام. كثير مهم الدراسات، ونحن صراحه بنستند عليها وبتوصلنا، بنوظفها بقلب الارتكل اللي بنكتبه. مرات وزاره البيئه هون كمان بدي اقول كمان انه اليوم وزير البيئه يمكن مش موجود بيناتنا، ولكن هو حدا قدامنا صدقا عم بحكي لكم، بندق له بالليل بيرد علينا، بيبعث لنا الدراسات اللي وصيته اي شيء. نحن هودي الناس ضروري يكونوا بهيدي المواقع، الناشطين ضروري يكونوا بهيدي المواقع، ومش اذا في حراك لا انا ما بشارك بالسلطه. ما انت بدك تيجي تقود هيدي السلطه للمحل اللي نحن بدنا اياه، يلي هو تكون الى جنب الناس وتحافظ على هيدي الناس. هودي بيتظاهروا بطريقه فينا نعمل فيهم لايف، فينا نعمل فيهم فيديوز نحطها على السوشيال ميديا، بس بالضروره لازم يعملوا تاتش عند هذا الانسان ليعرف انه بيوم من الايام اذا هو ما مرض ابنه بده يمرض وبيه بده يمرض وبده يروح يدفع من جيبته بالوقت اللي الدوله عاجزه اصلا تغطي الامراض السرطانيه. في ناس ما عم بتروح تعمل البي تي سكان بالامراض السرطانيه لانه ما معها تكلفتها. فمن هون في ضروره لانه يصير في تكافل بهذا الموضوع. بعد اخر نقطه ما بحب اطول كثير، برايي القانون البيئي والاعلام البيئي، يعني بده يكون في تكامل بين الاعلام والقانون والباحثين اللي هن الساينتفكس اللي بيشتغلوا بهذا المجال. اي خلل بهذا البارت، يعني هيدي السيركل هيدي بيكون فيها خلل، نحن ما بنكون عم نوصل لهيدي الناس وما عم نقدر نعمل وعي بيئي كامل. اليوم القانون البيئي بلبنان عمره بال 2002 طلع 444. طب في كتير امور منه مراسيم تطبيقيه ما تنفذت. طب احنا وين القضاء البيئي اللي عندنا؟ وين الشرطه البيئيه اللي عندنا؟ نحن ما عندنا شيء. نحن بندق على مخفر اذا حدا عم بيقطع شجره بقول لك ايه ما انا عندي 100 شغله، عندي ما بعرف مين معمر هون وعندي حدا عامل هون، مش فاضيين. نفس الشيء بالنسبه للقضاء، بقول لك القاضي انا عندي الدعاوى قدامي مكدسه، مش فاضي ابحث بموضوع انا محرقه او مش فاضي ابحث بموضوع. فنحن كمان موضوع القانون بده كمان يضلوا ابديتد لانه حتى يواكب المرحله اللي نحن وصلنا لها. نفس تطبيق هذه المراسيم اللي نحن بعدنا مأخرين عليها. اخر نقطه حكي الاستاذ نقطه كثير مهمه، انه في ناشطين للاسف وفي مهندسين هودي المنتفعين اللي بيكونوا ويلي هودي بيكونوا بيرعوا المحارق وبيرعوا الصدود وبيرعوا، بتلاقيهم بالمؤتمرات. هلا ما بعرف اذا حدا منهم بيناتنا بيطلعوا بدافعوا عن السد وبيطلعوا بدافعوا عن المحرقه وبيطلعوا بدافعوا عن المحارق وعن المطامر. يا عمي انتوا وين رايحين؟ اذا انت بدك تنتفع بشويه مصاري بس ما انت عم بتدمر بيئه وعم بتدمر اجيال وعم بتدمر انفاسنا. فمن هون ضروره الكلمه الحره والاعلام الحر يكون بعده عم يشتغل ونقدر نوصل لكل الشعب، لانه ما حدا بيرضى على نفسه انه يموت على البطيء او يشوف اولاده عم بيموتوا قدامه على البطيء. ميرسي.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Dada. I'm a banker, a financial consultant. So no real bank. Okay, and I do work in climate financing and environmental financing. So my question is to Samer, actually, because as he was talking, I was wondering what the reaction of the World Bank was when you started your protests, and whether you have, tried to appoint an independent environmental and social consultant to look at the results of the ISHA produced by the World Bank, and because you as civil society have the right to request this, and it will be funded by donors or the project developer, but perhaps donors in this case.
Okay, thank you. I think we're very... Okay, one last question.
My name is Layal. نحن عم نحكي كتير عن التشبيك، ما حكينا أبدا مدارس ولا يوث يمكن نحن عم نحكي دايما جامعات، بس سنة التأسيس بتبلش بعمر 16 و15 سنة اللي بيكون في حماس كتير مهم للولاد ليحملوا القضية. نحن ما حكينا أبدا دوركم كجمعيات بشغلكم مع تلاميذ بقلب المدارس يلي هن بيوصلوا لكم للجامعات. فتح باب التطوع، نحن بنحكي خدمة اجتماعية وخدمات تطوع، تحتاجوا كتير أعمال للتطوع. حتى بالميديا تلاميذ هلأ بيعملوا أفلام رائعة، كنا عم نطرح مين بيقدر يعمل 1 second فيديوز. صارت الكومبيتيشنز هلأ بتحكي ديجيتال، بس خلينا الكونتنت يكون environmental. نحن فينا نتوجه للمدارس لأنها هي بتعطي كتير، بتعطيكم كتير ميديا داتا تقدروا تستفيدوا منها بأقل كلفة ممكنة بتشغيل الشباب ووعيهم بهذا المجال. وبالميديا نحن كتير بنعمل أنشطة بيئية بالمدارس ما بيتسلط الضوء عليها أبدا، حتى ما بتتغطى، نادر ما نشوفهم عم بيسارعوا تيغطوا خبر بيئي. هيدا وفعلا مثل ما قال الأستاذ مش بس المجتمع، الأهل. يمكن نحن بمؤسساتنا عملنا مسؤول بيئي بكل مدرسة وعم نشتغل، عم نواجه مشكلتين كتير أساسيين، ما بعرف إذا بتساعدوا فيهم. نطلب جمعيات لتساعدنا، نحن بدنا نعطيكم زبالتنا من دون مصاري، بس تعوا خدون. عم نقرب أولادنا يفرزوا، خدوا الزبالة، ما في حدا مستعد يساعدنا بولا شيء. واحدة بكل مناطقنا من بيروت من أقصى الجنوب لأقصى الشمال، وبنفس بالمحل الثاني بنفكر مثل ما قال بنحكي بيئة بيعتبرونا فاضيين ما عنا شيء نعمله بنبعت شيء أو نشاط بيئي. بس وزارة التربية لازم نأكد عليها تشبيككم مع وزارة التربية. حكيتوا عن كتير عملوا منهج بيئي ونحط على سطور وما حدا بيستعمله. قالوا له فوتوه بهالمناهج وما حدا بيعرف الأولاد شو عم بيتعلموا عن موضوع البيئة. يعطيكم.
Thank you everybody for the questions. Maybe we can, I'm gonna just remind you what they were, and then maybe whoever can or wants to answer can, but we'll have to be brief. So first there was, and I'm sorry if I missed any questions, so first there's the question that Antoine posed on the systematized approach, on whether there can be something a bit more like that would link many of these struggles, but maybe to create something a bit more like on a national level that really is there. And these are some of the questions that were asked online. There's again a question or a comment about the role of the free media, and then the interests that are at play when it comes to media and covering something. And then there's the question on climate financing and the reaction of the World Bank when you protested against them. And then on the importance of networking and with especially youth and children and schools. So whoever wants to start, let's start with Samir, I guess. Yeah, we'll do like closing, like a small closing from each, and then we can close the whole thing.
Just to answer you on the World Bank question, when we first started the protest, like when I personally joined the protest, the World Bank wasn't really listening or looking at what we were asking. But then we got a bunch of expert people joining us and having more systematic notes and answers. So this is when they started looking at this whole movement. And me personally, I got in contact with Mr. Saroj Kumar. He was the regional manager of the World Bank. In a way, like a consistency, and always asking him questions and giving him alternatives and solutions. And this is when they started looking at it more. What's even like how we could have tackled this issue is when we gathered the whole diaspora. And I remember there was this one day we got an email of someone from the World Bank, and we sent the same email. Like more than 1,000 emails were sent. Their servers crashed because of this email, and this is how they started. There are more and more people joining the fight, so maybe we should listen more to them. And I'm not sure if I answered properly your question, but
my point is that perhaps we should accompany activism with a scientific.
This is what I meant when we got expert people, like not only in geology or ecology, but also financial experts to see how to allocate this fund and how can we reduce, because at the end of the day, this is not like a gift from the World Bank. Take $800 million, it's a loan, and it's not the people that are fighting to build this dam that will pay this loan. It's us and future generations. So, on this question, there's that. I have a lot of things to say on what you guys mentioned, because what they said is really important. بس كرمال حضرتك شو حكيتي، أنا شخصيا يعني مختص بالwaste treatment والsustainable farming. فيلي بعمله بروح على مدارس وثانويات وجامعات، بعطي محاضرات عن أهمية النفايات وكيف نديرها. إذا ما حدا عم بيساعدك، أنا بقدر جرب ساعدك، وحتى دبر لك شركات ياخدوا هيدا النفايات من عندكم.
اوكي كثير نحكي عن فري ميديا and بفتكر كان في questions على الموضوع. I cannot talk for all the media, of course, يعني, but this is specific problem to media, and the problem of environmental issues is that they are very linked to interest and personal interests, and so there's a lot at stake. This is why it's if you have a dependence, it's on a donor or whatever, it becomes more difficult, of course. And about what my colleague was saying about people being seeing environment as a luxury, I think this is I've seen a certain progression with that. Of course, it's still true with many people, but a lot of people, even if they are aware of the environmental implications on their lives, they still think they cannot do anything about it, and this is the problem. It's the link with how do we go to a more political activism, and of course, as also the other question that was said about systemic change. That we have to make it to see what's the big picture and to start advocating on it.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. سؤال Antoine, معك حق 100%. Actually, no. Well, often you can't criticize the problem. But actually, if you take climate change, you're not going to win the fight against climate change by closing one power plant at a time. We don't have the time, we don't have the people, we don't have the resources. It's about doing campaigns that have a systemic impact. And sometimes the systemic impact can come through specific campaign with specific target. If they are iconic enough, you can have that systemic change. You can toxify the industry, you can shake the business model, and so forth and so on. We find it's much more easier to mobilize people behind a specific target, and then through that specific target, create momentum to have a bigger systemic change. And that's the sweet spot, and it's easier said than done. And بعرف فينا نتعمق بالموضوع أكثر بكتير, but I don't think we have the time. على موضوع شكا, there's two things I want to say here. First of all, وقلتها بعتقد هلا صار الاستيراد أرخص بكتير. بفتكر من مصر حتى كانوا بيحكوا فيها. Oh, sorry, I'm mixing. Yeah, sorry. The import now is not now, but now the import is cheaper, and the community has been pushing that, but they've opened it for a while. I think at the time of the minister Fadi Jaisati, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and it's clear now that it's cheaper. But what I want to say is that because why don't they pressure now? I think one thing we didn't discuss in this gathering is that the economic crisis made the gap between David and Goliath even bigger, in my opinion. If you go to the community and activists, the young ones left, many of them left. The others cannot anymore to give their time, to volunteer, and give money to support a campaign because of and also the narrative has changed. We are in the middle of a crisis, and you come to speak about the environment now. We have other things, and therefore linking all these things together is very important. And the last point, very quickly, on the subject of the youth. We work a lot with youth, because not only because they are the prime stakeholder, because it's their future, but because they know more than us and are extremely aware. And last year at Sharm el-Sheikh, we took a delegation of youth from across the region. Morocco, Egypt, Lebanon, Bahrain, I can't remember all the nationalities. They were amazing. They know everything. We don't work with schools because we are original, but once I went to a school, I gave a presentation on climate change, and I felt very stupid because it was so basic for them. They were 7 and 8 years old, and they were like, You're telling us until. So definitely the youth is not only because it is their future, but because they know much more than we do, and they are amazing public speaker as well.
اوكي شكرا. مش حارد على اسئله، حاشكر. صار في مداخلات كثير حلوه. بدي اشكركم. الازمه عم بتصعب الامور، بس كمان فتحت لنا فرصه كثير كبيره بالزراعه، باداره النفايات. فبصير هيك متردد انه بركي لازم تدوم بعد شوي هيك وهيك فتنا فيها، لانه عن جد بس هل قد التحدي كبير انه حتاخد شويه وقت. فما تعرف شو بدي اتمنى كرمال اللي ما عندهم القدره انه ترشحوا على الانتخابات البلديه.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today to this talk. I'm sorry if you couldn't answer all questions, but we are short on time. I also want to thank the panelists for their time and for their input. I think it was really a valuable talk. And I think like one of the conclusions that we can take is that there's like Unsi just said, like there's a lot of work on the ground, but there's also the opportunity to be part of decision making, either through elections or in other ways. But it's important to use, I think, all the tools at our disposal, because there's not, I think, one way of achieving what we want to do. There are several parallel ways of doing so. I also want to thank the interpreters and the translators for their efforts and for being with us. And just wanted to let you know that there's a small snack behind you, a reception, for those who want, that we can continue these conversations around some food. So yeah, thank you again for coming. Thank you for the panelists, and Sahtan.